Welcome to this comprehensive masterclass. Today we explore the profound history and revolutionary legacy of the ancient Hebrews. I am Professor Ling, and this is another episode of the series on Western culture and civilization, offered and produced by OS2K, also known as Open Source to Knowledge, a non-profit educational institution operating worldwide with collaborators, writers, researchers, and authors, all contributing freely towards creating valuable and unique educational content for the most discerning and demanding learner. So, let us dive deeply in this masterclass titled The Hebrew and the New Vise of God and the Individual. This tradition introduced a new view of God and the individual that became the cornerstone of Western civilization, redefining our understanding of humanity. In this session, we will trace the history of the ancient Hebrews from the time of the patriarchs to the 2nd century BC. We will describe the unique concept of Yahweh and explore how it fundamentally differed from the polytheistic beliefs of other ancient peoples. We will discuss the Hebrew emphasis on the dignity and moral autonomy of the individual as a central pillar of their faith. We will define the covenant, explain its relationship to the law, and describe the ethical obligations these imposed on the Hebrew people. We will examine the role of the prophets, focusing on their critical development of the concept of social justice and its lasting impact. Finally, we will explain the significance of the Hebrew religion for Western civilization and how its doctrines were transmitted through Christianity. The journey begins in Mesopotamia, where the Hebrews originated before migrating to the land of Canaan, carrying early cultural seeds with them. This migration across the Fertile Crescent was more than a physical journey. It was the start of a unique cultural and religious identity. Early Hebrews absorbed features of Mesopotamian culture, finding parallels in their laws, creation stories, and ancient legends that shaped their early worldview. Eventually, some Hebrews journeyed to Egypt, where over time they became forced laborers, a period of hardship that would define their national narrative. In the early 13th century BC, Moses emerged as a transformational leader, leading the Hebrews in their historic exodus from Egyptian bondage. While wandering in the wilderness of Sinai, the Hebrews were forged into a nation, united by a profound new belief in a single God. They were united by a revolutionary belief in Yahweh, a God who was not a part of nature, but the sovereign creator of all existence. Modern scholars continue to debate the historical reality of the Exodus, as direct physical evidence from that era remains elusive to archaeologists. Regardless of the archaeological debate, the story of the Exodus became a central pillar of Hebrew oral tradition passed down through generations. The wandering Israelites eventually returned to the land of Canaan, joining other Hebrew tribes and beginning a new chapter in their history. The 12 tribes initially lived in a loose confederation, bound together by their shared faith and the leadership of spiritual and military judges. Under the threat of foreign invasion, they united under Saul, their first king, who established the foundations of a centralized Israelite kingdom. Saul was succeeded by David, a brilliant warrior and poet who defeated the Philistines and established Jerusalem as the capital. David's son, Solomon, led Israel to its height of power, transforming Jerusalem into a world-class center of trade and religion. Solomon's greatest achievement was the First Temple, a monumental structure that served as the sacred center of Israelite worship and identity. However, following Solomon's death in 922 BC, internal rivalries and tax disputes led the kingdom to split into north and south. In 722 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrian Empire, leading to a massive deportation of its people across the region. These Hebrews were scattered and eventually assimilated into other cultures, becoming known to history as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. By 586 BC, the Chaldeans conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, destroying Solomon's temple and leading to a second wave of deportation. Thousands were taken to Babylon. This period, known as the Babylonian captivity, would profoundly redefine the Hebrew faith and identity. The prophets claimed this destruction was a divine punishment for the violation of God's laws, calling for a return to ethical behavior. Despite the challenges of exile, many remained faithful to Yahweh and the law of Moses, refusing to assimilate into Babylonian culture. During this time, priests struggled to preserve their heritage by codifying laws, records, and traditions into what we now know as the Torah. In 538 BC, the Persian king Cyrus allowed the exiles to return to Judah, marking the beginning of the Restoration period. By 515 BC, the Second Temple was dedicated in Jerusalem. The people, now called Jews, centered their lives around this new holy site. The Hebrew scriptures, known as the Tanakh, comprise 39 books written by diverse authors over more than 1,000 years. The first 5 books, also called the Pentateuch or Torah, contain the foundational history, laws, and teachings of the Jewish faith. Genesis tells the story of creation and the patriarchs, establishing the relationship between God and humanity from the very start. Exodus recounts the deliverance from Egypt and the receiving of the law, the defining moment of national liberation and identity. Leviticus details the laws of holiness and sacrifice, emphasizing the purity required to live in relationship with the divine. Numbers records the journey through the wilderness, a time of testing and transition for the newly formed nation. Deuteronomy provides a final summary and renewal of the law as the people prepare to enter the promised land. These texts represent a millennium of tradition, encompassing everything from history and laws to deep religious inspiration and poetry. The Hebrew view of God marked a revolutionary break from Near Eastern thought. Yahweh was seen as sovereign and transcendent. Unlike other gods, Yahweh was not born or created. He was the source of the universe, possessing a supreme and holy will. The Hebrews demythicized nature, viewing it as a separate creation rather than a collection of competing deities. Their belief was based on deep religious conviction and a personal relationship with God, rather than abstract rational inquiry. This view elevated the individual as the centerpiece of creation, made in God's image with inherent dignity and worth. Hebrews insisted that God did not create people to be slaves. Instead, men and women were responsible for their choice of good or evil. This meant a total rejection of idol worship. Ultimate loyalty was granted only to God, never to a human ruler or institution. By granting loyalty only to the divine, the Hebrews established a foundation for resisting the absolute power of earthly kings. True freedom was understood as voluntary obedience to divine commands. Disobedience led to suffering and a break in the relationship. Central to their history was the covenant, a sacred and unique agreement between God and the entire Hebrew nation. As a chosen people, they were tasked with setting an example of righteous behavior to lead other nations toward the truth. This identity brought a heavy responsibility to act as moral teachers for all of humanity, demonstrating God's law in action. The Ten Commandments stood as a divine moral code, providing clear ethical guidelines for both the individual and the community. Justice was the central theme. The law emphasized a duty to care for the poor, the weak, and the oppressed in society. While influenced by other Near Eastern codes, Israelite law showed a much greater ethical awareness and a more humane spirit. They famously rejected the idea that the rich deserved different legal treatment than the poor, prioritizing people over property. However, the law was also strict, calling for severe punishments like stoning or execution for those who violated God's holy commands. These laws regulated every aspect of daily life, ensuring that the community remained pure and faithful to the covenant. Families were patriarchal. Fathers held supreme authority, but the law also provided unique protections for women and children. Unique for its time, Jewish law regarded women as persons rather than property, giving them a distinct legal and moral status. Their view of God made the Hebrews uniquely aware of history. They saw it as a linear process filled with sacred meaning. To the Hebrews, history was the work of God, a divine drama where every event was worth recording and remembering. They kept their past alive through rituals and celebrations, ensuring that the lessons of history were never forgotten by the next generation. Prophets emerged in times of national crisis, acting as God's messengers to call the people back to their ethical duties. Amos spoke fearlessly against social disparities, warning that the mistreatment of the poor would bring divine judgment. Hosea emphasized God's enduring love and faithfulness, urging the people to return to their sacred relationship with Yahweh. Isaiah offered a vision of a future messianic age where all nations would beat their swords into plowshares and live in peace. Jeremiah spoke of a new covenant where God's law would be written not on stone but on the very hearts of the people. The prophets criticized social evils and wealth disparities, shaping a social conscience that would influence the entire world. Their revolutionary doctrine was simple yet radical. Everyone has an equal right to justice and a duty to denounce evil. This meant that individuals were not just responsible for their own actions, but for the moral health of the entire society. Prophets moved toward universalism, claiming that all people were precious to God and should join peacefully together. This universalism was accompanied by an awareness of the individual's unique value, a concept that sits at the core of Western thought. The Hebrew awareness of free will and the conscience of the individual laid the very foundation for Western morality and philosophy. The Jewish Bible has remained a cornerstone of moral life, providing a literary and ethical framework that has endured for millennia. Christianity emerged from this tradition, carrying its monotheistic and prophetic values to the ends of the earth. The historical Jesus was deeply grounded in this Jewish background, his teachings reflecting the core values of justice and love. The Hebrew vision of a future messianic age is at the very root of the Western idea of progress and social improvement. The scriptures produced a literary style and craftsmanship that has inspired countless novelists, poets, and thinkers across history. We have explored the history of the Hebrews, their unique view of God, and their profound emphasis on individual dignity. From the covenant to the prophets, these ideas continue to shape our understanding of justice, responsibility, and freedom. Thank you for joining this masterclass. I hope this deep dive into the Hebrew legacy inspires your pursuit of wisdom. I am Professor Ling from OS2K. Keep learning, stay curious, and I will see you in the next session of our series. And a huge thank you to our producer and content creator, and to all the researchers and contributing experts in the origins of Hebrew history.